CreditTrades here, and today we're going to take a look at dragging brakes. And if you don't know what this is, it's a pretty common problem on some vehicles, specifically Subarus in the rear. What will happen is the brake pads will pinch down when you go to brake to hold on to the brake disc, and then when you release the brake, they won't fully come back. And the big problem with that, and the reason why you want to fix it, is because if your brakes are stuck or sticking, they'll be on almost all the time when you're driving down the road using the gas and not using the brakes. So it'd be like having your brake pedal slightly pushed down a little bit while you're driving down the road. Now, obviously the big problem with this is your brakes are gonna wear down way faster if this happens. Usually it doesn't happen on all four wheels at the same time. Usually it only happens on one wheel at a time or maybe two. And I'm going to show you some different things to look for if you think this might be happening with your vehicle and how to fix this. So the things that you might notice if this is happening on your vehicle, you might have really poor gas mileage. If you're running your brakes all the time, it's dragging the brakes, it's pulling your car back, trying to stop it, so your mileage will be really bad, or it might not be super bad, it might just be a little bit worse than typical. Another really common thing you might notice is one wheel might be a lot dirtier than the rest. If you notice here, this one here has a lot of dirt built up around the rims. This is brake dust that is worn off. And so if you're getting a lot of brake dust on just one or two of your wheels, another really common sign that it's your brake pads getting stuck on. When your brakes are on all the time, it's quite smelly. And so after you drive, if you get out of the car and you notice like a metallic sulfury type scent, it's like the smell of a burning clutch. It's very distinct. You should be able to notice that pretty easily by smelling it. The other thing you can do to figure out which wheel it is if you, just after you've been driving, if you get out and you put your hand right next to the brakes here, you should be able to feel some heat. If you do feel heat on one wheel or two wheels, then it's most likely those wheels that are the ones that are dragging, because when it's dragging all the time, it's producing a lot of friction and making a lot of heat. Some other things to check for is your slide pins here. These are your slide pins. These should be lubricated to help them slide. They should be sliding freely. It should be pretty soft. If you have to like yank on these to get them to move, or if they're solid and frozen, they're seized, then they definitely need more grease. And again, these boots can tear sometimes, letting the grease out. So make sure these are sliding freely. Other things it could be, if it's in the rear, it could be your parking brake. Your parking brake can be adjusted in this little tab right here. Pull this out. You can check your parking brake in this little hole here. Your wheel should move when freely in park on an all-wheel drive car like a Subaru. And if you move it down to the bottom in here, there's a little wheel, and you can use a screwdriver to move the wheel to adjust the parking brake in or out. And if it's out too far, then your parking brake might be what's dragging too. So check your adjustment, adjust it out if it's the dragging of the parking brake. Even though these are pretty new pads, the inner one was wearing quite a bit faster than the outer pad was. And that's typically a sign that that pad was dragging a lot. And then the last one, this one is less common, and it could be other things when you have this problem. If you notice like a shimmy when you're going down the road, just you're driving straight, you're not using the brakes at all, you might hear a whoop, 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 whoop from the back, from the brake, just from that pad rubbing on the rotors all the time. You might hear some noise, maybe a little bit of grinding, and you might notice a little vibration that wasn't there before. Those are the common things to look out for. And now we're going to look at some of the ways that you can fix it. And this whole process really doesn't take a whole lot of time. It doesn't take that many tools. A little socket set and a jack and a jack stands, for example, is really all you're going to need to do most of this stuff, and some grease. For this car, it uses two 9/16 bolts to hold on the brake caliper, and those are in the back here. You can just use a normal wrench here to loosen these and unscrew them. Once you remove those two bolts, you can pull your caliper off here. It should come off pretty easily. You can set it up here. Some people use wire to tie it up. And then you can see your brake pads are right here. Now on these Subarus, the most common reason these drag is because the brake pad tabs or the bracket here will start to rust. And when they rust, the metal kind of expands a little bit. And so sometimes these can get pinched right on the ends here, and it will stop the pads from coming back out away and sliding on the slides here. And so if it does do that, all you're gonna need to do is wire brush these off really good, wire brush this off. You might even need to use a file on here to get a lot of that rust off. What I like to do is I like to put a little bit of a grease, or I like to use fluid film because it's really slippery stuff. And you don't need a whole lot, and you want it just in these little ends here to help them slide a little bit better, and also stops them from corroding in the future and expanding again. And once you do that, they'll be able to slide a lot more freely. You can tell if this is your problem if these are kind of stuck in here. Look at this one. I can barely pull this thing out of here. It's like jammed in there. This one here, it comes out much easier. This one's been fine, but it's just these end little tabs on here that you have to file down and put just a little bit of grease on there. You don't need a lot. And if you get a lot, it can get on your brake pads, which you don't want. It's just down in the little crannies right in here and right in here. So when you start filing these, get these in here, use the back of the pad to clamp down. If you clamp down on the brake part itself, it can narf up the brakes. So make sure you clamp on the pad itself, and then you're just gonna file down the edges here, and on the top a little bit. It doesn't need a whole lot. All right, so once you got them all ground down, do both of them and make sure it's nice and shiny. You don't need to take a whole lot off of here. The key is really getting something on these so they don't corrode again, and to help lubricate them just a little bit. And again, you don't need a whole lot. I like to spray a little bit of fluid film on a paper towel. This is a rust proofer and lubricant. And then I like to just take my finger here, rub it all along this little edge here, and try not to get any on the pads. If you do get a little bit, it will come off. If you are looking to get fluid film, I'll post a link in the description below. It's also a really awesome rust proofer and undercoating that you can put on your car, stop it from rusting. My car is really old and has almost no rust on it at all, because I use fluid film every year to keep the salt off of it. Really great stuff. If you have any questions, you can post them in the comments below.